It started 2 months before my due date, the day I thought peace would finally return to our house. My name is Greta, and I was 29, pregnant with my first child, trying to stay calm in a home that no longer felt mine. The old brick house in Richmond creaked with every memory of my childhood, and lately every sound felt like a warning I couldn't quite explain. When my sister came home that afternoon, dragging a silver suitcase and a broken marriage behind her, my mother rushed to open the door as if rescuing a war hero. I watched from the hallway, one hand resting on my belly, trying to smile even as the air thickened. I told myself it would be temporary, a few weeks until she got back on her feet. But something in her eyes, tired, sharp, searching, made me uneasy. Mom said softly that she just needs time to heal, as if that excused the way she moved into the guest room, without asking the way she started speaking over me at dinner, finishing my sentences like I'd lost the right to them. I wanted to believe family meant safety. Instead, I found myself stepping carefully in my own kitchen, lowering my voice in my own house, wondering how long before my calm cracked. If I'd known that letting her stay would cost me everything, my peace, my home, even my parents' trust, I would have locked that door myself. But I didn't. Before I tell you how that decision changed everything, hit subscribe and share your thoughts, because this story still hurts to remember. At first, having my sister Camille home felt temporary, like a storm passing through that would fade after a few days. She arrived with 3 suitcases and a box of kitchenware that somehow ended up covering half the dining table. Within hours, the living room became unrecognizable. Piles of clothes appeared on the couch, a makeup bag sat open beside the remote, and 2 empty wine glasses waited on the coffee table as if someone else would clean them. Dad quietly picked up one of the glasses and placed it in the sink without saying a word. He never liked confrontation, and Mom used that silence as permission. She told me that Camille was still healing, that I should give her time and space. I nodded because arguing with Mom only made her defensive. She had always seen Camille as fragile, even though she was older and stronger in every visible way. The following days blurred together into an exhausting routine. I woke before sunrise to make breakfast and fold laundry while Camille slept until noon. When she finally got up, she would stretch, yawn, and complain that the coffee wasn't strong enough or the room too cold. I tried to stay patient, reminding myself that stress could harm my pregnancy, but every sigh and careless remark chipped away at the calm I fought to maintain. By the end of the week, she had turned the guest room into her own studio. Clothes hung over the chair, skincare bottles crowded the dresser, and her laptop played endless shows while she scrolled through social media. Once, when I asked her to lower the volume, she stared at me like I had insulted her existence. "You're getting old, Greta," she said, laughing softly. "You sound like a mom already." I wanted to tell her that I was about to become one, but the sarcasm in her voice made it pointless. Dinner became the hardest part of each day. Camille liked to dominate the table, talking about her ex-husband's betrayal as if she were the only one who had ever been hurt. Mom would nod sympathetically, sometimes even tear up, while Dad hid behind his newspaper. I sat across from them, pushing food around my plate, trying not to notice how Camille interrupted me whenever I spoke. One night, she leaned back, sipping wine, and said, "You've changed, Greta. You used to be fun. Now you're just quiet and dull." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I excused myself from the table and washed the dishes with shaking hands. Through the window, the sky over Richmond was turning a heavy gray. I could hear Mom in the living room telling Camille that I was just hormonal, that I didn't mean to be distant. Camille laughed, that light, cruel laugh that never reached her eyes. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was Austin calling from Singapore. His voice always carried a calm that steadied me. I tried to sound cheerful while describing the chaos, but he could tell something was wrong. "Don't let them wear you down," he said. "This is your home too. You have every right to be comfortable." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe I wasn't losing control of my own life. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the house breathe. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a reminder that peace had left long before Camille arrived. I told myself things would improve once she started looking for a job, but she didn't. Instead, packages began arriving at the doorstep almost every day. Shoes, dresses, expensive candles, none of them things we could afford. Mom said she was using her savings, but I knew Camille hadn't worked since before her marriage. One afternoon, while paying the utility bill online, I noticed a familiar card number saved under recent transactions. It wasn't Camille's, it was Mom's. My pulse quickened. I double-checked, hoping it was a mistake, but the receipts all pointed to her. Camille had been using Mom's credit card for weeks. The total was more than $1,000. I could have confronted her then, but something in me stopped. I was too tired to start another argument, too aware that no one in this house would take my side. So I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen. Camille's laughter echoed from the living room, where she lounged with a glass of wine and a show playing loud enough for the neighbors to hear. That night, I sat in the dark nursery, one hand resting on my stomach, whispering to the baby that I would protect us both. But deep down, I wasn't sure how. By early fall, tension was no longer something we could hide. The house seemed smaller with every passing day. Camille decided she needed a quiet space to focus on finding a job, as she called it. That morning, I found her standing in the doorway of my reading room, arms crossed, eyes scanning the shelves. "This room feels peaceful," she said, smiling faintly. Before I could respond, she had already set her laptop on the desk and claimed the space as her own. It wasn't long before the truth surfaced. Her so-called job hunt was nothing more than hours of live streaming. From behind my desk, she spoke into her camera, her voice sweet, yet calculated, telling strangers about her healing journey after a painful marriage. She painted herself as a woman, wronged, abandoned, and misunderstood, while hundreds of sympathetic comments poured in. I heard her rehearsing lines like, "My sister is lucky. She has a supportive partner overseas, and I'm just trying to rebuild." She didn't say my name, but the implication was clear. The sound of her laughter carried through the hallway. Mom believed it meant progress. "At least she's doing something positive again," she said while folding laundry beside me. "It helps her feel normal." I wanted to tell her that Camille wasn't healing, she was performing. But in this house, questioning Camille meant inviting an argument I could never win. When I tried to read in the evenings, her voice echoed from the next room. Words like betrayal, recovery, and courage spilled into my space until I could barely focus. I shut my book and pressed my palms against my belly, reminding myself to stay calm for the baby's sake. Sometimes I caught Camille watching me with a smug expression, as if she knew how deeply her presence unsettled me. Mom's attitude shifted too. One afternoon, as I was cooking, she said softly, "You shouldn't let jealousy get to you, honey. Your sister has been through enough." The words hit harder than I expected. Jealousy. That was the story Camille had been weaving, and everyone was starting to believe it. Later that week, Austin sent a care package from Singapore. Inside were small baby clothes, a plush toy, and a note that read, "For both of you, my girls." I placed the box on the nursery shelf, grateful for something that felt pure amid all the tension. That evening, while scrolling on my phone, a familiar photo appeared on my feed. Camille had posted a picture of the same toy, captioned, "A sweet gift from a family friend who still believes in kindness." My stomach twisted. The comments flooded in with sympathy, praising her strength. She had taken what wasn't hers, not just the gift, but the gesture behind it. I confronted her gently, asking if she could at least credit Austin. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, did he send that? I didn't realize. It was lying in the nursery." Her tone was airy, dismissive. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just turned away, afraid that raising my voice would prove her right, that I was emotional, unstable, unreasonable. That night, I tried to talk to Dad. He sat in his recliner, reading the news on his tablet. I told him about the live streams, about the photo, about how it made me feel. He listened quietly, then sighed. "Greta, Sometimes peace is worth more than pride. Let her have her moments. You'll only make things worse if you push back. The words settled over me like cold rain. I realized then that I was alone in this. Mom believed Camille was recovering. Dad believed I should yield. And Camille believed she could do whatever she wanted without consequence. So I found my own way to breathe. That night, I opened an old notebook from college and began to write. At first, the sentences came out shaky, uneven complaints, fragments, thoughts I hadn't dared to say aloud. But as the hours passed, the words steadied. The pages filled with everything I couldn't tell anyone: the frustration, the anger, the quiet despair. Writing became the only space she couldn't invade. When I closed the notebook, I felt lighter, as if I had reclaimed a small piece of myself. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A week after I gave birth, peace was the last thing in that house. The doctors had kept me for a few days longer than expected, but the moment I stepped through the front door with my baby, I wanted to believe things would settle. The scent of milk and new life filled the air, and for one night, that tiny heartbeat in my arms made everything else fade. By morning, reality returned. Camille was already in the kitchen, arms crossed, frowning at the sound of crying that came from the nursery. "Does she have to be this loud?" she asked, rubbing her temples. "I barely slept last night." Mom turned from the sink, giving me that familiar look of gentle reproach. "Greta, you have to be more considerate. Everyone here needs rest, not just you." I stared at her, too stunned to respond. I had barely slept for 2 hours, yet somehow I was the problem. The days blurred together in an exhausting rhythm of feeding, rocking, and shushing. Each time my daughter whimpered, Camille groaned as if the noise was an attack. She complained to Mom about the smell of baby lotion, about the soft light from the nursery lamp, about how she couldn't heal in this chaos. Mom nodded, murmuring something about patience, while I stood silently with a crying baby pressed to my chest. Dad tried to mediate, but his silence only deepened the divide. One afternoon, I overheard Camille talking to them in the living room. Her voice carried that practiced sorrow I knew too well. "I'm worried about Greta," she said. "She hasn't been herself. She yells for no reason, cries when no one's around. Maybe it's postpartum depression. I think she's losing control." I froze in the hallway, the baby asleep in my arms. It wasn't true. I hadn't yelled, hadn't broken. I was just tired, but Camille knew exactly which words would wound me most. That evening, when I tried to confront her, she smiled faintly. "You should rest, Greta. Everyone's concerned about you." The words felt rehearsed, like something she had already said online. I turned away, afraid of what I might say if I stayed longer. 2 mornings later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 uniformed officers standing on the porch. The taller one spoke first, his voice calm but formal. "We received a call from someone in the household expressing concern about your well-being." "Mind if we come in?" My hands tightened around the doorframe. Behind them, Camille lingered in the hallway, pretending surprise. Mom stood nearby, pale and anxious, while Dad avoided my eyes. They asked a few questions: if I was sleeping, if I had support, if I ever felt unsafe. I answered calmly, clutching my baby close. The officers exchanged a glance, then nodded. "You seem fine, ma'am. Just remember to rest. Everyone here should give you some space." They left soon, after the sound of their car fading into silence. I stood there holding my daughter, feeling the world tilt beneath me. The people who should have protected me had invited strangers to question my sanity. Mom wouldn't meet my gaze. Dad mumbled something about misunderstanding, and Camille simply walked past, humming softly as if nothing had happened. That night, I sat in the nursery with the lights low, my baby asleep against my shoulder. I realized then that my family had chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. I whispered to my child that we would be okay, even if it was just the 2 of us. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to be alone under the same roof. 2 weeks later, I packed what little peace I had left. The morning light fell over the crib as I folded baby blankets, careful not to wake my daughter. Every sound in that house had become unbearable: the creak of the floor, the whisper of voices outside my door, even my own breath felt out of place. I left a note on the kitchen table that said only, "Thank you for everything. I need space to heal." The apartment I found was small, tucked above a bakery near downtown Richmond. The air smelled of sugar and coffee every morning, and for the first time in months, I could breathe, without watching my words. Austin helped cover the deposit and the first month's rent. He called each night, his face glowing on the screen, as he asked about the baby's sleep, about my meals, about everything small and ordinary that no one else seemed to care about. The first few days alone were quiet, almost painfully so. I missed the noise, even when it had been cruel. But silence was a kindness I had forgotten existed. My new neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Klein, a retired schoolteacher with silver hair and soft hands, introduced herself the day I moved in. She brought soup and told me to knock any time I needed help. When she held my baby, she hummed the same lullaby her mother had sung decades ago, and for a moment, the world felt gentle again. Austin and I spoke for hours at night, though the distance between Richmond and Singapore stretched like an ocean I couldn't cross. He listened to every detail: my exhaustion, my relief, my guilt for leaving. "You didn't run away," he said softly. "You chose peace." Those words lingered long after the call ended. By the end of the week, I began writing again. At first, it was just notes about the baby, her tiny hands, her morning smiles, the way she kicked the blanket when dreaming. But soon, words turned into short essays, pieces of truth I could finally say out loud. The act of writing steadied me. Each paragraph became a small rebellion against the silence that had once swallowed me whole. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "You shouldn't have left like that. Camille is struggling more than ever. You made things harder for her." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I didn't reply. I simply closed the phone and looked at my sleeping child, deciding that peace was not something I needed to justify. A few nights later, while paying bills online, I logged into the joint account Mom and I had shared since college, an account we both used for household expenses. The balance read, 0. My hands trembled as I checked the transaction history. Several large transfers had been made over the past week, each labeled to the same recipient, Camille. The shock came not from the money itself, but from the finality it carried. They hadn't just taken my trust. They had emptied what little connection remained. I sat there for a long time, the city lights flickering through the window, holding my baby close. In that stillness, I realized I had lost my family, but not myself. For the first time, that truth didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. By early winter, the truth found its way to my doorstep. The air outside had turned brittle, the kind that carried the scent of cold metal and wood smoke. One afternoon, while I was rocking my daughter to sleep, a gentle knock came at my door. It was Mrs. Klein, holding a tin of oatmeal cookies and an expression that said she had something heavy to share. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I ran into your sister at the pharmacy yesterday," she said softly. "She told someone behind the counter that your mother gave her money to make up for what she's been through." She sounded proud of it. For a second, I couldn't respond. My mind returned to the empty joint account, the sudden withdrawals, and my mother's text defending Camille. It all fit together too neatly to ignore. I thanked Mrs. Klein, though my voice cracked midway, and once she left, I stood by the window for a long time, watching the snow start to fall. That night, I called Austin. He listened quietly while I told him everything. "I knew something didn't add up," he said. "I'm flying home." 3 days later, he was there, standing at my door with the same warm steadiness that had anchored me through every storm. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in the fight. We spent the next morning at the bank. I explained the situation while Austin handled the technical side. The clerk, a woman with sharp glasses and sharper eyes, frowned as she scanned the records. "There's something else you should see," she said, turning her screen slightly toward us. There it was, a credit card issued under my name, but linked to a different address with purchases that stretched back several months. Luxury items, restaurant bills, travel bookings. None of them mine. Austin leaned closer. Can you confirm who opened that account? The clerk typed for a moment and then looked up. It was opened online. The verification photo and ID belong to someone who looks very much like you, but it isn't you. She turned the screen again and my stomach dropped. It was Camille using my old headshot from years ago. The room seemed to shrink around me. I had imagined betrayal in many forms, but never this. Austin reached for my hand under the table, grounding me. "We'll fix it," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Over the next few days, we gathered every document, every bank statement, every screenshot. Austin helped organize them into a single file while I tried to keep the baby calm through the long hours of sorting. The evidence was undeniable. Camille hadn't just taken money, she had built an entire false identity in my name to fund her comfort. Late one evening, as I sat feeding the baby, my phone rang. It was my father. His voice trembled at first. "Greta," he said. "I saw the statements. I didn't want to believe it, but I checked myself. I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was capable of this." I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. "Dad, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted peace." "I know," he said quietly. "You deserve better than what we gave you." After we hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not anger, but a calm kind of closure. The kind that comes when truth finally stands where lies once lived. I printed every document, placed them neatly into a folder, and sealed the envelope. It was addressed to my father's name. At the top, I wrote one line in blue ink. "For the last conversation we will ever need to have." Then I placed it by the door, ready for delivery the next morning. By Christmas week, the diner smelled like burnt coffee and endings. The same cracked red booths, the same neon hum over the counter, but everything inside me felt older. I arrived early, the folder of documents tucked under my arm, the air heavy with the scent of snow outside. My parents sat in the corner booth where we used to celebrate birthdays. They didn't look at me when I approached. My mother stirred her coffee in slow circles, her lipstick mark blurring against the rim. My father's hands were folded tightly, knuckles white as if holding something invisible together. The silence between us stretched thin but sharp. Camille walked in 15 minutes late, wrapped in a cream coat, her movements deliberate as if fragility itself had become a performance. She gave me a weak smile. "You look tired," she said softly, then turned to our parents. "See, I told you she's not well." I placed the folder on the table and opened it. Bank statements, transaction histories, credit card applications, everything she had forged. The papers made a crisp sound as I turned them one by one. "You can stop pretending now," I said, my voice calm but steady. My mother's head snapped up. "Greta, what is this? Are you accusing your sister again? Do you realize how cruel that sounds after everything she's been through?" Camille lowered her eyes but didn't speak. She didn't need to. That silence was her shield, the same silence she had always used to let me take the blame. I slid the last page forward. "These are from the bank. She used my name, my ID, my credit. It's not a misunderstanding anymore." For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father reached for the papers with trembling fingers. His eyes moved slowly across the lines and his lips parted without sound. I didn't want to believe, he whispered finally. "I thought if I stayed quiet, it would protect everyone." But I was wrong. His voice broke, and for the first time in years, he cried, not out of grief but recognition. My mother pushed the folder away. "You're tearing this family apart. Is that what you wanted?" I looked at her and realized she wasn't defending Camille out of love, but out of fear. Fear of admitting she had chosen the wrong child to protect. "No," I said quietly. "I'm just refusing to stay broken so you can keep pretending we're whole." I stood, gathered the folder, and reached for my coat. My father's voice followed me, rough and small. Greta, please, don't leave it like this. I turned to him. I'm not angry anymore, but I can't stay where love means silence and lies. Outside, the air cut through my lungs, sharp and cold. Snow had begun to fall, coating the street in fragile white. I walked until the diner lights blurred behind me, a distant glow fading through the storm. Under the soft drift of winter, I whispered to myself, some lessons cost peace, not revenge. And for the first time, that truth didn't hurt. It set me free. A year later, peace finally had to face mine. The morning light poured through the rose arch of a small garden in Richmond, brushing across soft petals and white chairs arranged in quiet symmetry. I stood in front of Austin, our baby, gurgling in the arms of Mrs. Klein, who smiled like a proud grandmother. There were only 10 guests, all faces that had earned their place in our peace. The world outside didn't need to witness this moment. It belonged to us. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I felt something shift deep inside me. Not a fairy tale happiness, but a calm certainty that I had survived everything meant to break me. We exchanged rings, simple bands without diamonds, because neither of us needed proof of value beyond the life we were building together. That evening, as we cleared away the last of the flowers, the postman arrived with a parcel wrapped in gold paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. My parents had sent a wedding gift. Austin looked at me, waiting. I opened the box, saw the crystal vase, and quietly placed it back inside. The next morning, I mailed it back with a short note that read, "Thank you, but peace cannot be bought." Weeks later, I learned that Camille had lost her job after her employer discovered irregular financial records. Friends she once bragged to had turned their backs. She moved to another state, her social media silent except for a single email she sent months later. It said only, "I'm sorry. I wish I could start over." I read it twice, then deleted it. Forgiveness had already taken place, not toward her, but within myself. I no longer needed her to understand what she had destroyed. I had rebuilt it without her. Our new apartment smelled of fresh paint and lavender. Austin was reading on the couch, our son asleep in his arms. I looked around, and for the first time in years, I realized that happiness doesn't have to be loud to be real. Some ties don't break. They simply fade when peace replaces pain. Forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. Some families teach us love, others teach us limits. Protecting your peace isn't cruelty, it's courage. There is power in walking away from what hurts, not to punish, but to preserve yourself. Because love at its truest never demands self-destruction. When silence heals more than apologies ever could, that's not bitterness, that's freedom. Walk away when staying means losing who you are. Thank you for listening until the very end. If you've ever chosen peace over blood ties, share your story below. Your words might help someone else realize they are not alone. Maybe your courage will remind them that healing isn't about revenge, but about reclaiming their life. I'm grateful you stayed to hear mine. Now tell me yours.